What if the very thing you thought would bring him closer, your tenderness, your consistency, your unwavering love, is the exact reason he started to slip away? It's a heartbreaking realization that many women never dare to say aloud, "I gave everything, and he still left." But beneath that silence is a deeper truth your heart has always suspected. Your sensitivity, the way you feel things before they're spoken, is not a weakness. It is a rare emotional intelligence that picks up the invisible shift in energy long before the words, "I'm not sure," ever appear. You felt it in the way his texts grew shorter, in the subtle hesitation before his smile, in the growing space between moments of connection. And so you did what felt right. You tried harder. You gave more. You showed up even when your own heart was tired. You believed, like so many of us were taught, that effort would fix everything. But the more you gave, the more he pulled away. What was once mutual started to feel one-sided, and what was once full of life began to feel hollow. Here's the strange and painful paradox. Effort, when born from fear, does not deepen attraction. It dilutes it. From a Jungian perspective, attraction isn't sustained by effort. It's sustained by energy. Not what you do, but what you evoke. When love turns into performance, into proving, pleasing, or preventing loss, it stops being love and starts becoming survival. And survival carries the scent of fear. Even if you never speak it, it's felt. It lingers in your voice, your body language, the atmosphere between you. And energy, not words, is what the unconscious truly responds to. Carl Jung believed that our psychic energy reveals more than we consciously know. When your giving is no longer rooted in your center, when it quietly comes from the fear of losing someone, you lose something more vital, your inner gravity. And the relationship, without realizing it, begins to drift. Not because you aren't enough, but because you've stepped out of yourself to be chosen. This video begins not with judgment, but with compassion. You weren't wrong to care deeply. You weren't wrong to try. But now it's time to question the deeper belief that says more effort equals more love. That belief has kept so many women stuck in cycles of overgiving, self-abandonment, and quiet heartbreak. Let's begin a new conversation, one where attraction is not about working harder, but about coming home to the quiet power of your own presence. Think about a moment that still lingers in your body. A man who suddenly leaned in, texted constantly, seemed mesmerized by your presence, then just as suddenly grew distant. Nothing dramatic happened, no fight, no betrayal. Just a quiet fading that left you replaying every conversation, every look, every word you shared. Many women over 30 recognize this pattern painfully well. You may have wondered what you did wrong, what you said too much, or what you failed to give. But here is the uncomfortable truth that changes everything. He was never obsessed with you as a person in the way you were taught to believe. He was obsessed with the inner emotional state you awakened inside him. This is where Carl Jung's psychology reveals what modern dating advice never explains. Attraction does not live in logic or behavior. It lives in the unconscious. A man is drawn not to effort, beauty, or availability alone, but to the feeling that arises in his inner world when he is near you. Jung called this projection. When a woman activates a man's anima, his inner feminine world of feeling, meaning, longing, and emotional depth, he experiences a sense of aliveness that feels almost magical. He cannot explain it, but he feels more himself in her presence. That is what obsession truly is. Not possession, not control, but unconscious recognition. This is why so many real-life situations feel confusing. You may remember being with a man when you were calm, playful, living your life. and not trying to impress him. He leaned toward you then. He initiated. He opened up. He seemed emotionally present in a way that surprised you. Then something shifted. You started trying to secure the connection. You checked your phone more often. You adjusted your schedule around him. You explained yourself. You reassured him. And slowly, the intensity faded. Not because you became less attractive, but because the emotional field changed. The feeling he once discovered inside himself grew quieter. Jung understood that projection thrives when there is space. When a woman is connected to herself, her life, her rhythm, she becomes a mirror that allows a man to encounter parts of himself he has not touched in years. Curiosity, vulnerability, depth, meaning. But when that space collapses, when everything is explained, offered, or given too quickly, the projection dissolves. The psyche loses interest not out of cruelty, but out of saturation. There is nothing left to explore internally. This explains why appearance alone never sustains attraction. You can look your best, say the right things, and still feel invisible. And at another time, wearing nothing special, doing nothing extraordinary, you felt magnetic. The difference was not what you did, it was who you were being, your emotional tone, your groundedness, your inner fullness. Men often say they feel drawn without knowing why. That is because the unconscious does not speak in reasons, it speaks in sensations. Here is the part that few people are honest about. When a man becomes distant, it is often because the emotional state he once accessed through you no longer activates his inner world. This does not mean you failed. It means the connection was built on projection rather than true individuation. He was responding to what you awakened, not to the reality of who you were becoming. So ask yourself this with compassion, not blame. When he felt most drawn to you, who were you then? Were you living from your center or reaching outward for reassurance? Were you present in your own life or focused on maintaining the connection? And when he pulled away, did you feel yourself shrinking to hold him or expanding back into yourself? This is the turning point. Attraction is not something you manufacture. It emerges when your inner world is alive, sovereign, and emotionally rich. And when a man feels that, he is not obsessed with you. He is remembering himself through you. Picture a woman sitting across from a man she has been seeing for weeks. In the beginning, she laughed easily, spoke freely, sometimes went quiet when she felt reflective, and did not rush to fill every silence. He leaned forward then. He asked questions. He seemed curious, almost alert. But as time passed, she decided to be consistently pleasant, always agreeable, always warm, always available. She thought stability would make him feel safe. Instead, something subtle changed. His attention drifted. His energy cooled. What she did not realize was that in trying to be easy to love, she became easy to predict. This is where emotional contrast becomes the quiet force that breaks control. Not drama, not manipulation, not emotional games, but the honest expression of a full inner world. Many women over 30 were taught that consistency means emotional sameness. Smile through discomfort. Stay agreeable. Do not confuse him. Do not be too much. Yet Jung understood something most relationship advice ignores. The psyche is not drawn to what is flat. It is drawn to what feels alive. A woman who is always pleasant unknowingly removes tension from the emotional field, and tension is not danger. It is polarity. It is the space where curiosity lives. When every response is predictable, the unconscious relaxes. It stops searching. It stops wondering. Control becomes possible because there is nothing unknown left to encounter. Real life shows this again and again. You may remember a time when you were deeply immersed in your own life. Some days you were playful and light. Other days you were quiet, focused, or introspective. You did not explain every mood. You did not apologize for every pause. Men often felt drawn during these phases. They felt something they could not name. Then later, when you tried to stabilize the connection by smoothing yourself out, the pull weakened. Jung believed that the psyche is magnetized by what it cannot fully grasp. Emotional contrast does not mean unpredictability for the sake of power. It means permission to be human. Warm when you feel warm, silent when you feel inward, curious one moment, grounded the next. This creates depth, and depth disrupts control. Control thrives on certainty. When someone can anticipate your reactions, your availability, and your emotional responses, they unconsciously feel safe, dominating the rhythm of the connection. But when your inner world has dimension, they must meet you rather than manage you. They cannot reduce you to a single role. This is why emotional contrast often feels threatening to someone who is used to control. A man may sense that he cannot fully define you. He may not always know where he stands emotionally, not because you are withholding, but because you are not collapsing your inner life to keep him comfortable. And this is precisely what awakens curiosity. Think about how this shows up in everyday moments. You do not rush to respond to every message because you are present. In your own life, you do not always explain your silence because it belongs to you. You can be affectionate without being dependent, serious without being cold, playful without being performative. These shifts are not tactics. They are expressions of wholeness. Jung would say that this is where projection deepens. The unconscious begins to work harder. He wonders what you are thinking. He feels drawn without knowing why. Not because you are mysterious on purpose, but because you are not flattening yourself for reassurance. This is where control breaks. A man can only control what he can predict. When your emotional life is honest, layered, and self-contained, there is nothing to grip onto. He must either meet you in person or fall away. So ask yourself something uncomfortable but liberating. Have you been shrinking your emotional range to keep someone calm? Have you been choosing predictability over truth? And if you allowed yourself to be fully human again, not pleasing, not distant, just real, who would that disrupt? You can see it clearly in the moment she texts him again, even though she told herself she wouldn't. Not because he did something wrong, not because she has something urgent to say, but because he didn't text back soon enough. There is a quiet panic under her ribs, the kind she's been trained to ignore. She frames it as just reaching out or keeping the connection alive. But underneath, her nervous system is asking, "Am I still chosen?" What she doesn't realize is that in this moment, she is no longer texting him from desire, but from absence. From the fear that without his validation, she cannot feel herself. This is how neediness begins, quietly, disguised as love. It slips in through the small, anxious gestures. The apology was not necessary, the over-explaining, the need to control the rhythm of communication. All of it appears caring on the surface, but beneath it, something sacred has been misplaced, her center. Carl Jung would say this is a symptom of disconnection from the self, the true inner source of energy, wisdom, and emotional stability. When a woman unconsciously places her sense of worth in another person's availability, attention, or emotional reaction, she has relocated her psyche outside of herself. She is no longer relating from her center. She is orbiting someone else's. And here's the paradox. The more she tries to hold him closer from this space, the more repelled he feels. Not because he is cruel, not because she is unworthy, but love cannot flow freely when it is being asked to fix something. A man may not know how to explain it, but he feels it viscerally. He feels the pressure to be the source of her calm. He feels responsible for her mood. The connection begins to feel heavy, not light. And in that weight, attraction quietly starts to fade. This happens in marriages, in new relationships, even in long-distance love. A woman who once radiated peace starts seeking constant reassurance. "Do you still love me?" becomes a recurring question. Not always in words, sometimes in her tone, her eyes, her hesitation. She gave up her own plans to wait for him. At first he may comfort her, but eventually he feels the shift from partner to emotional caretaker, and he begins to pull away. Jung's concept of individuation reminds us that attraction flows toward wholeness, not need. When a woman is centered in her own emotional life, she becomes magnetic, not because she withholds, but because she contains herself. Her sadness is not a trap. Her joy is not a performance. Her presence does not ask to be rescued. She brings love from fullness, not fear. So ask yourself, have you been loving from overflow or reaching from lack? Have you mistaken consistency for control? Have you been managing someone's love instead of magnetizing it? Let's be honest, neediness is not a flaw. It is a signal, a sacred alarm telling you that you have left yourself again, that somewhere along the way you stopped listening to your own inner voice, that your nervous system was trained to associate love with anxiety, and that perhaps the only person who can calm that ache is you. Now imagine this. What if you didn't need him to text back to feel okay? What if you didn't shrink when he pulled away? What if your emotional life was so rooted in your own soil that every connection became a garden, not a dependency? Who would you become if you returned to your own center? And would he still be drawn this time, not to fix you, but to witness your wholeness? It usually starts during the third or fourth date. The conversation slows, and in the silence, she begins to fill in every blank. She starts recounting past relationships in too much detail, naming all her flaws before he even asks, justifying her sensitivity with stories of childhood wounds. He never asked. But she offers it anyway, thinking that if he sees her vulnerability up front, maybe he'll stay. Maybe he won't get surprised later and leave. What she doesn't realize is that in this moment, she's trying to protect herself by overexposing herself. And the very thing she thinks will create closeness is quietly dissolving the mystery that creates desire. We've been taught that honesty means transparency, that love should come with a full autobiography. But there is a quiet desperation in explaining yourself too soon. When every layer is revealed before trust is built, it's not intimacy, it's self-abandonment. It's trying to manage someone's perception of you instead of letting them experience you over time. And often, it is not love speaking. It is fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough unless your pain is fully seen. In real life, this shows up in subtle ways. A woman feels emotional at dinner, and instead of just letting the emotion move through, she begins to over-explain. "Sorry, I get triggered when someone goes silent. It's because of my last relationship. He used to ghost me and I'd spiral." And she keeps going. The man is listening, but he's no longer experiencing her. He's now analyzing her. He's no longer curious. The space for emotional resonance has been replaced by intellectual overload. And without mystery, his desire to lean in begins to fade. Carl Jung spoke often of the power of the unconscious, the deep symbolic layer that moves us without words. When everything is named too quickly, we leave no room for the psyche to wander, to imagine, to project. And while projection can be dangerous when left unchecked, it is also how fascination begins. Jung observed that we often fall in love not with a person's facts, but with their essence, the part we cannot explain. And when a woman leaves space for that essence to unfold without rushing to justify it, she allows the man to meet her beyond logic, beyond the surface, in the realm of feeling, intuition, and symbol. Restraint, then, is not manipulation, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that true intimacy is revealed in layers, like pages of a sacred book, not dumped like data on a screen. There is nothing more magnetic than a woman who lets herself be known slowly, not because she is hiding, but because she respects her own depth too much to give it away all at once. So ask yourself, have you been explaining yourself in order to be accepted? Have you been revealing your pain as a strategy to avoid abandonment? Are you sharing from a grounded connection or from a hidden anxiety that you must hurry to be understood? What if your power wasn't in convincing someone to stay, but in trusting that the right person will be drawn to your presence, not your past? What if the mystery you've been told to hide was actually the doorway to a deeper connection? And what if holding your story close, not as a secret, but as something sacred, was the very thing that made you unforgettable? Love doesn't disappear when you take space, but obsession does. And maybe that's what truly scares people. When a woman stops making them the center of her orbit, they realize they were never in love, only addicted to the attention. The truth is, your sacred absence can speak louder than your constant presence, and when your life moves with a rhythm that honors you, the right people don't vanish. They rise to meet you. Take the example of a woman named Elena. After years of feeling unseen in her relationships, she decided to stop rearranging her life for every man who showed interest. She stopped texting back immediately. She stopped canceling her gym classes or delaying her creative work just because he asked to see her. At first, the silence made her anxious. She had been conditioned to believe that love requires availability, but something powerful began to shift. One man, in particular, started noticing. When she no longer replied within seconds, he began to initiate more thoughtfully. When she chose her routine over his last-minute invitations, he started respecting her time. And when she didn't explain every boundary, he leaned in closer, curious, attentive, no longer assuming she would always say yes. This wasn't a game, it was alignment. Elena wasn't withholding to manipulate. She was simply reclaiming the parts of her that used to vanish in the name of connection. In real life, many women fear that being unavailable means being forgotten. So they overextend. They pick up the phone at midnight, even when exhausted. They say yes to dinners they don't enjoy. They abandon their routines just to keep someone close. But what if that closeness is only proximity, not connection? What if their hyper-availability is not love, but fear in disguise? Carl Jung taught that the psyche seeks equilibrium. When one part of the self overcompensates, like constantly giving or showing up, the unconscious eventually revolts. Fatigue sets in. Resentment builds. Identity dissolves. Jung called this the process of enantiodromia, the tendency of any extreme to turn into its opposite. A woman who always gives breaks eventually. And in that breakdown, she either becomes cold and avoidant, or finally centered. The latter is the beginning of individuation. So ask yourself, has your presence become a performance? Are you afraid that if you stop being available, love will vanish? Or is it possible that your constant presence has dulled your own light, and the person in front of you has stopped seeing you clearly because you've made yourself too easy to reach? Psychologically, absence rooted in self-respect is not rejection. It's a reflection. When you step back from giving too much, you allow the other person to step forward. You create space for energy to move both ways. And from an emotional investment standpoint, this is essential. Human beings value what they participate in. When a man must invest, initiate, show up, and contribute, he doesn't just want more. He begins to feel bonded because he had to meet you. He had to earn access to your world, your rhythm, your time. And this is not about superiority. It's about sovereignty. When a woman builds a life that nourishes her, one that includes friendships, work, creativity, rituals, and rest, she naturally becomes selective, not closed, but discerning. Her love becomes something you arrive at, not something handed out on demand. So, what if your availability is not the proof of your love, but the leak of your power? What if by pulling back gently, you allow someone to realize what your presence truly means? And what if your rhythm, once feared as too independent, is actually the very pulse that makes your love unforgettable? Let them feel your absence, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. Because those who are meant for you will not disappear, they will move through the distance and arrive with presence. Sometimes, the most unforgettable thing about a woman is not what she says or does, but what she reminds someone of within themselves. Not every connection is about chemistry. Some are about memory. Memory not of moments, but of meaning. He may not understand it right away. At first, it feels like fascination, a pull, a presence that lingers in his mind even when you're no longer in the room. He starts wondering why your voice calms him when the world is too loud, why your eyes feel familiar, like a mirror that does not flatter, but sees. And slowly, he realizes it is not just you he's drawn to. It is the part of himself that wakes up when he's with you. Carl Jung called this the process of recognition through projection. In relationships, especially romantic ones, we are not merely seeking a partner. We are seeking a reflection, someone who carries an energy, a symbol, or a wound that speaks directly to what we have lost touch with inside ourselves. This is why some people become unforgettable, because they don't perform, they reflect. They don't try to be impressive, they resonate. You did not make him obsessed. You reminded him of his lost wholeness. Perhaps he had long buried his tenderness under decades of proving himself. Perhaps he had silenced his own emotional depth because the world told him it was weakness. And then you arrived, not as a savior, not as a solution, but as a mirror, calm, present, deep, unapologetically connected to your own emotional world, and in watching you honor your own rhythm, he began to remember his. This is not manipulation. This is soul memory, and it is not always safe. Sometimes, when a man begins to remember himself through a woman, he panics, he pulls away, he tries to regain control. Why? Because awakening is terrifying when you have lived for years asleep. This is why Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their souls. But the seed is already planted, and whether he runs from it or leans into it, something irreversible has occurred. He saw himself through you. So the question is not, how do I make someone obsessed with me? The deeper question is, what am I awakening in others simply by being aligned with myself? When a woman lives from her center, when she no longer overfunctions, overexplains, or overgives, her energy becomes magnetic, not because it tries, but because it remembers. And those who are ready will remember themselves too. You do not have to chase love, shapeshift for approval, or lower your standards to be chosen. You only have to stay true, because when a man meets a woman who knows who she is, she doesn't remind him of her. she reminds him of himself. And that is what keeps echoing long after she's gone. So ask yourself, who do people become in your presence? What truth do they touch? Not because you hand it to them, but because you embody it. The obsession you once chased begins to dissolve the moment you realize you were never meant to be possessed. You were meant to reawaken, and those who are ready will not need to be convinced. They will remember, and that remembrance will change everything. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.